We haven't got a menu, got stew and ale.
Hello, wandering traveler. Take a seat if you have the time, and I will tell you a tale. Our story begins with Karn Mondel. Karn grew up near Luskan, the eldest of 3 siblings, Pel, Havlin, and Malo. His father was a cold and humorless man, and at the age of 15, Karn decided to make his own way in the world, joining up with the Luskan Guard. There was relative peace at the time. Despite his lack of previous training, Karn soon grew to be proficient with a variety of common weapons, earning the respect of his peers raiding along the Neverwinter coast. He developed a close friendship with Shale Lightbeard, a hill dwarf and sergeant in the guard. Shale acted as a mentor in martial skills and took a particular shine to Karn, even teaching the young yokel some of the rudiments of Dwarven. Karn saw his family infrequently over the next few years. Havlin came to Luskan proper to join the host tower, while Pel prepared to take over the farm and Malo grew up wild and carefree, only one of the siblings to escape their father's temper. As it inevitably goes in Luskan, war broke out when Karn was 21, this time with the Warathim Islanders. By now a corporal in the guard under Shale, Karn acquitted himself well in the first year of the fighting, though the Luskanite forces were ultimately pushed back. Before battle resumed the following year, he was promoted to sergeant of a new squad. Things went much better for Luskan this time around. They took the major towns on the main island and closed in on Rethgard, a fortified town in the northern island of Axard. The Warathins had largely fragmented at this point, presenting guerrilla resistance. Any patrol might be ambushed, and a night's sleep was all too likely to be interrupted by whooping, hollering tribesmen setting fire to tents and killing where they could. By the time the Luskan forces reached Rethgard, the mood was murderous. Although at one time well fortified, the stone walls of Rethgard were crumbling. The defenders were few in number. They held off the Luskanites for barely a week. When the gates fell, madness seemed to seize the men of Luskan. Before commencing the battle that day, the commander of their force exhorted the men to
show these Rothan dogs who owns them now.
Karn tried to keep his men together as the army surged into the city, remembering well all the surprise attacks the Warathins had sprung upon them so far. However, his commanding officer, Lieutenant Ronell, ordered him to release his squad to their just deserts. Putting aside his concerns, Karn joined in the orgy of blood and rapine that consumed the city. To this day, the details of those events remain vague. Karn recalls clubbing an old woman to the ground with a silver statuette he was stuffing into a sack, while her grandchildren cowered in the corner. He recalls cutting down 2 young men, no older than his brothers were, when he left the farm, for the crime of throwing rocks at some of his troops while they broke into a house. He recalls the inside of an inn, 2 of his men methodically stoving in the barrels of ale as 3 others filled their tankards, and a woman's screams sounded from the upper floor. He recalls Shale looking on grimly as a half-naked woman, wrists bound, was pushed staggering between several of his men as they laughed cruelly. Although at first he had nothing to do with his men's assault on the women of the town, by the end of the day, the relentless violence had numbed his inhibitions. Karn did not fully return to himself until a flash of fire cut along the left side of his face. Suddenly awake to his surroundings for the first time in hours, he stumbled back as he took in the scene. He had been in the midst of unbuckling his belt. Before him, on a low pallet bed, crouched a woman in a tattered blue dress clutching a broken piece of glass. A young woman, who bore an uncanny resemblance to his sister. "Malo?" The struggled gasp escaped his lips. The woman responded by spitting at him across the room.
Come on then, Luskan bastard. Not so fun now your prize fights back.
Gazing at her in horror, mind racing, Karn gradually noticed the differences. The crook of her nose, the angle of her eyes, the line of her cheekbones. Still stumbling and dazed, he made his way to the door, buckling his belt. Opening the door, he quickly exited and closed the door behind him. Several of his men were lounging in the hall outside. They started in alarm at the blood on his face. Thinking quickly, he said,
"Bitch got a broken bottle from somewhere. Wonder where, eh?"
shooting a glare at Jack, one of his corporals. who even now is loosely holding a wine bottle.
I cut her throat. Let's move on. Nothing left here.
Karn continues, wiping his bloody face with his sleeve. The remainder of the day passes in excruciating slowness. Although he avoids any more atrocities himself, Ernell's watchful eyes restrain him from ordering his men to do the same. The day's events bubble and roil in his mind and his stomach both. He is sick several times, quietly. As night fell on the ruined town, he went in search of Shale, finding him sitting in a corner where two walls came together, his squad nowhere in evidence. Shale looked up at Karn's approach, his eyes red, his face red, his gaze burning.
Done with your fun, boy?
The dwarf growled, the harshness echoing in contrast to his usual jovial demeanor.
Shale, I just got caught up in the madness. Everyone else is doing it, and the commander's orders,
responded Karn haltingly.
Damn the commander to the 9 hells! His whole army has lost itself, lost its mind. Raiding shipping, the early fights of this war, army versus army. This all makes sense. You have to fight what you believe in, and if that's a paycheck, so be it, but this!
Slate gestures at the smoke, choking the sky, his gesture encompassing the harsh bellows and screams echoing through the streets.
This is madness, and I cannot be a part of it any longer.
Shale climbs to his feet, turns towards the ruined gates, and sets off.
Wait!
Calls Karn.
Where are you going?
I'm done with this army.
Shale responded bitingly, still walking away.
Done with you as well, if you'll not leave it. You can all burn.
Stunned, Karn stood and watched as his friend and mentor was lost to the smoke. Shale's absence is noticed after a few days, culminating in Karn's squad and Lieutenant Mondel hunting him down for desertion. The lieutenant cruelly commanded Karn to deliver the killing blow, or join him in death. Devastated, he performed numbly for the rest of the Rothan campaign, and when they returned to Luskin, he resigned from the army. Went home only to find the farm a burned-out shell, no one in evidence. He asked the closest neighbors what they knew. Bandits, they say, but won't meet his eyes. Attempts to visit his brother at the host tower were refused at the gate. He feared their fate may have been his fault, by fate or vengeful Luskin jurisprudence. Lost, with no roots in the world, he thought perhaps he would travel to Mirabor and see if he could find any family of Shales. He was forced to move on when Luskin advanced towards Mirabor. He followed the long road to the south. Spent the next couple of years living wild, using some of the skills he had learned as a child to trap small game. He was trying to escape, or forget what he had done, to no avail. Plagued by guilt and visions of the horror at Rethgard, Karn collapsed at the Temple of Limiter in Tribor. He poured out the horror he'd been party to with no thought for the future, knowing only he had to release it, or be destroyed. Fortunately, the Reverend Father of the temple thought he could be redeemed, and set about rebuilding him to do just that. Months later, he traveled on to Waterdeep. He sought training on how to employ his martial skills with faith and righteous action. Karn's plans to seek redemption were initially stymied just weeks after arriving. At the first sizable Holy Day celebration, he was faced with the masochistic nature of the higher forms of Limiter's worship. He simply did not have it in him to sit by and watch his new comrades endure flagellation. He reacted with disgust and guilt-fueled outrage, not worshipful holy respect. He had shown his martial prowess already in the training yard, and when it was clear he was not suited to continue in Limiter's service, the weapons master suggested he seek out Torm's following. He did so, and over the next 5 years honed and retrained his skills in the service of duty, loyalty, righteousness, and Torm. He did not make friends easily with his classmates. The scars on his soul were not so easily washed away. Still, he came to deeply respect the goals and aims of his order. Karn was eventually ready to believe that he was capable of good. Nevertheless, his actions continued to haunt him, and a fierce desire to protect the helpless and put down those, such as those that had been burned in him. He did not hide his past actions from the temple superiors, and they supported his quest for redemption. Still, he accepted that those he had wronged might one day call him to account. He could only hope that he might manage to lighten his load through service until that day came. Now that is all the time I have for you now. Now go away, before I make a tale of you as well.